It's finally time to talk about Trae, the free AI code editor that gives you access to high-end models. Now, I know at this point you've probably played with a few of these different AI code editors, and while this does have many similar features, it does have one feature that I've not seen in any of the other AI code editors that definitely makes it stand out. So check out this video. I'm going to give you a quick tutorial on how it works, and the best part is this is free. In fact, right now they actually don't have any pricing plans. I'm sure that'll change in the future, but for now you can download it for Windows, Mac, or Linux. You don't need to pay for anything, and you can access all of the high-end models like Claude 3.7, Gemini 2.5 Pro, GPT 4.1, you name it, they have access to it in this tool for free, which I think already is compelling enough to at least download it and check it out. So with that said, let me hop over to the editor. Let me start going through some of the features. Again, stick around. Later in the video, I'm going to show you some of the more unique features related to the AI agents that you can build in Trae. Now, full disclosure here, I did partner with Trae for this video. However, again, the tool is free. You don't need to pay to use it. And obviously, if you don't want to use it, you don't have to. I'm just showing you what it can do and walking through some of the features that I do genuinely believe are pretty unique. Otherwise, I wouldn't put them on this channel. Anyways, we're inside of the editor, and the first thing you're going to want to do here is open up some kind of folder so you can start working on a project. So either open an existing project or open a new one. In my case, I'm just going to open up a new one. So I'll go to my desktop, I'll just make a new folder, and I'm just going to call this Trae demo like so. Okay, so I've got a new folder opened up. I'm just going to go ahead and press on trust and trust all of the authors. Now, the first thing you're going to notice about this tool here is that while it is a VS Code fork, it has a very different UI. So they've actually gone ahead and built their own user interface here. You can see that a bunch of the buttons and the icons are different. While it is inspired from VS Code, I do appreciate that they actually did something a little bit more unique rather than just completely copying the VS Code UI, which is what most of the other tools do. Now, really what you want to be focused on here is obviously this collaborate with Trae window. Now, you can collapse or open this from the top here where it says the toggle AI sidebar, and I'm going to go through the main features that this has, but the standout features and the ones we'll talk about later have to do with the agent. So you can see that if you press on agent here, we have a builder mode similar to something like the composer mode in Cursor. We have builder with MCP, so you can connect various MCP servers here, which I'll show you later. And then we have create agent, where you can actually make your own custom AI agent that can accomplish specific tasks. This is the unique feature, the one that I think is super cool. And again, we'll dive into that in just 1 second. So first, let's go over the main UI elements. Probably the most important thing here is going to be the model selection. So where it says Claude 3.5 Sonnet, you can go here and you can adjust the model. You can hover over them and you can see some of them support images, the DeepSeek ones do not. And again, you can access all of these for free. So for right now, I'll just go ahead and put on GPT 4.0 because this one is pretty fast. But if you wanted to add your own custom model, you can do that as well by choosing the provider, the specific model, and then the API key, and then you can use it like that. Okay, cool. Now, obviously here, you can create a new chat window if you want to reset your progress by pressing on this window. You can view the history of all of the chats that you have. You see I don't have any because I just deleted it and reinstalled it for this video. And then you can go to settings, and from the settings, you can adjust settings related to your agents, your MCP servers, your context, a bunch of stuff here, rules. So for example, this is the same thing as like a cursor rules file where you can specify some rules that the model will always adhere to so that you don't need to type them for every single prompt. So that's interesting. We can look at that later. And then obviously models, which we already looked at. Okay, cool. So let's go back to the Trae window here, and let's start just in the default mode, which is kind of the chat mode here, which allows us to ask questions about our code base. This can generate code as well, but it works a little bit differently than the agent mode, which I'm going to show you in 1 second. All right, so I just gave this a simple prompt here. I said, can you help me create a fast API backend that contains JWT token authentication, a simple database, and basic CRUD endpoints that would represent a library. Now, keep in mind, this is not in agent mode, so this is not going to go create all of the files for us. It's simply going to act like something like ChatGPT would by giving us all of the instructions and writing the code directly in the chat window. So this is the first mode, right? We haven't enabled anything. We're just talking directly here. This is what I like to use for kind of consulting with the AI. That said, Trae can still write code while using the default mode and will give you prompts to be able to insert that code or create new files. It just won't do that without your permission in this mode. Now, through this chat window, you can also get many constructive suggestions and solutions. Now from here, you can see it's giving me some commands like we need to install these libraries. So in this case, I could go ahead and press run. If I do that, it's actually going to run this in my terminal for me, and then it will be able to see the output of this command, or we can copy this inside of here. We also can add to terminal, we can copy this, and then obviously same thing with the completions here. So we can copy this, or if we add a new file, so we go ahead and make a file like main.py. By the way that you do that is from the folder. You can press on this button that says new file, or you can make a new folder. Then what we can do is you can see that I can go here and go insert at cursor, or I can go add to new file. So I'm going to go insert at cursor. It inserts it right here. Or I can go ahead and press on apply. It's going to apply that to my current file, and then I can accept the changes or accept the diff. Okay, so that's kind of the first thing you can do. That's the most basic usage that you've probably seen in many other tools. Now, of course, from here, you can also add various pieces of context. So if we click on context here, you can see that we can have code, we can have files, folders, workspaces, and the two interesting ones here are documentation and web. So what's actually very interesting here is that if you're working with like a newer library, for example, or something that's not commonly used, you can just link directly to the documentation. You can just add a doc like this. So you can go here to docs. Let me go back and I'll show you how that works. So add new doc. And you can go add docs. You can add it from a URL, or you can add it from a local file. So maybe it's local documentation for a module that you're using. Or alternatively, if we go back here, you can add web. So if I go to context and web, then I can add a particular website, and it will be able to actually view the website, get all of the content, and then use that in the context. So let me come up with a new chat window and a new prompt here to show you the context in action. All right, so I'm just gonna test this out with a Reflex Python module here, which is a little bit less known. I'm gonna go to context, I'm gonna go to doc, I'm gonna add a new doc, press on add docs, I'm gonna add from URL, I'm gonna paste in the URL here, and I'm gonna say reflex docs like that. I'm gonna press on confirm. And then you see that it's going to actually go ahead and index this site. And then once it's ready, we're going to be able to use this. So let's wait 1 second. So the indexing is finished now. And if I open this up, you can see that it found 8 different pages. It has them here. So now I'm going to go back to Trae, and I'm going to put this context in. So I'm going to go context, doc, and then I'm going to specify the Reflex documentation. Go ahead and press enter, and let's see what we get. All right, so we got the output here again, reference the documentation that just wrote us this simple script. Obviously, I'm just using the basic feature. Later, I'll show you some more advanced stuff. Now, in terms of the rest of the context, it's pretty straightforward, but essentially when you're using these types of tools, the more context you give the model, the better. So if I was working in this file right here where I have this kind of fast API going on, I may want to reference a particular function, or I may want to reference the file itself and tell the model, hey, make a change here, look at this code, and then maybe write some clients that can call the endpoints, etc. So to do that, I would add context like this, read this file, and then I do context, file, and then I specify main.py. I can say look at this function, and then again, add the context. I can add some code. So when I do code here, I can actually select the entire file. I can select different functions like reading the book, updating the book, etc. And then I can actually tell it what I want it to do. I think you guys get the idea, but always add as much context as you possibly can when you're using this to get the best result. And now let's look at a few other things that we can do with this tool. All right, so as much as the chat window is useful, of course, you can actually write code, even though I know most people don't do that nowadays. So if we come into the editor, we have obviously autocomplete. So if I do something like @app, if we spell this correctly, you see that it's going to start popping up. So I can go delete. It's going to start giving me the route for author. You can see that I have the main line here to actually run the code. And another thing that, of course, we can do is we can have an inline completion, or kind of an inline edit, or AI chat, whatever you want to call it. So they have Control-I or Command-I. You also can press this button right here when you're highlighting on a section. So I could say, refactor this to be easier to read or something. I don't know, whatever you want it to do. Go ahead and press enter, and then it will actually make the change. You can see the diff, and then you can go ahead and accept that by pressing Alt-Y, or just pressing on yes like that. Okay, also if you want to add this to the chat window, it's a different command than if you were working in cursor. So you can hit Control-U. It's now going to reference those particular lines, and then you can talk to the chat or talk to the AI about that code, get changes to it, etc. Pretty straightforward, but I just wanted to show you that, of course, this does have very good autocomplete, and it has that kind of inline completion that you may have seen in other editors. Typically, I will use the inline completion when I want a very small targeted fix. I use this sparingly and mostly when I don't need the context of the rest of the file or anything else. When I don't want to confuse the AI and I just want something very small changed or added, I use that inline completion, kind of more like a precise, like surgical needle, as opposed to if you're using the chat window, that's more of a general tool that can do a lot more and can be affecting multiple files at a time. All right, so that's it for working in the editor. Now let's get over to the cool stuff here, which is using the agent mode. Okay, so we're gonna click on @agent here, and what we can do is we can use the built-in agents, so the build agent or the builder with MCP. Now, as soon as we enable the builder agent here, all of a sudden we have a lot more powerful tool where it can actually go and create files for you, delete files if you give it permission to do that, for example, edit files, make multiple changes at once, run commands for you, and pretty much build the entire project. Again, similar to something like Cursor. So let me give this a more complex prompt and let's see what it can do. So I'm giving this a much more complex prompt this time to see if it can create a large application using Streamlit and Fast API. So let's run it and see how it works. So the agent is finished now, and if we go down here, you can see it tells us all of the steps that it completed. So it created the front end, the back end, database, README, the requirements.txt. Of course, I could give this something a lot larger, especially if I enabled one of the more advanced models. I'm just doing something faster for the video purposes so that you guys can see how this tool works. So what it's going to do is it's going to show me all of the files and I can review these one by one. It's definitely a good idea to actually do that rather than just pressing accept all. The smaller the task you get these AI agents to work on, the better. Now, I'm just going to go through them one by one. Okay, so we'll just press accept on all of them. Let's imagine I actually read through and made sure that this was correct. And there you go, that is the builder. So again, use this when you wanted to make multiple file changes, create new files, potentially even run commands. For example, I can tell it, can you run, if we spell this correctly, the application, and it should actually give me the terminal commands to do that and allow me to either accept the commands or reject them. So let's see. So you can see here, we do actually need to press on run. We also can allow this to auto run the commands. So I'm going to press run here. It's going to run the back end for us. It's going to view the output of the terminal, and then it should run the front end as well. So you can see that's going. And there we go. It pops up with the command here to run the front end. So we can go ahead and press on run. It's going to open that in a new terminal, and then I can just bring the application open here, and you can see we have the Streamlit UI. So that is the builder mode, but now I want to go over to the builder with MCP mode. And in order to use this, I need to add some MCP servers. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay, so after you go through that dialog here, it's going to bring you to this, explains what MCPs are. MCP is essentially Model Context Protocol. What that means is it's just a way for your AI agents to communicate with the outside world and to use various tools. It's just like a standardized protocol. So you can use things like web search, for example. You can use a Figma MCP to read in various Figma files. You can use an MCP that connects to Google Drive or Slack or all kinds of different things. There's tons of them out there. And I actually made an entire video on MCP servers, which I'll put on the screen right now in case you care to learn more about them. Now I'm going to go to add MCP, and fortunately here they have an MCP marketplace, which makes it a lot easier to add these MCP servers, because before you had to manually add them. There was some more advanced configuration, and it's a pain in a lot of the other editors. So for example here, let's add the Puppeteer MCP server. Okay, so it doesn't need any information for us, so we can just add it directly. So I'm going to go ahead and press on confirm. I'm going to go do not show again. Yes, I understand. And then it's going to prepare the MCP server. Now, while it does that, I'm going to add a few other ones. So for example, we can add GitHub. Now, in order for GitHub to work, we need to give it our GitHub personal access token. So I'm going to grab that quickly and put that back in here. And you'll notice for some of the other ones, so if we go to Google Maps, for example, it doesn't have as easy as a configuration. And that's because you do need to get things like API keys, or there's certain setup that you need to perform, but it gives you a link to the page, which you can actually open nicely here directly inside of the editor, where it shows you what you need to do in order to configure the MCP server. But again, this is still significantly easier than many of the other editors that I've used. So let's go back. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. Let me add GitHub. Then I can at least show you how it works with these two different MCP servers. Okay, so I just added my access token here. You can see GitHub is now preparing. And if we press into these MCP servers, it will show you a list of tools that it actually has access and the ability to use. So for example, for GitHub, it can create and update files. It can search repositories. You can actually tell it like, make a new repository, push all of the code from here up to the repository. And that's the point of MCP servers, is that you get all of these additional tools that you can now pull in and customize and use with your agents. So with Trae here, if I have builder with MCP, I can say something like make a new GitHub repo for this project. And because I gave it admin access to do this in my token that I generated on GitHub, it should be able to actually call that particular command from the MCP server and do that. So you can see here, it says this is the name, this is the description. It's not going to be private. I'm going to go ahead and press on run. And again, if I want it to automatically be able to run this, I can tick that little slider there, and it will just be able to run the commands without me needing to give it access. So if I press on this here, you can see that it's now made a new GitHub repository. Now it hasn't yet pushed the code up here, but this is a new empty repository that was created directly from my IDE. So now I can say, can you push the changes for me? And it should be able to go ahead and do that either by running the terminal commands or by using the MCP server. Anyways, I'll just stop that for now because we don't really need to do that. And now I'm going to move on and show you the next cool feature, which is the custom agent feature. Now, this is the standout feature, the one that I haven't seen in any other editors. So let's get into it. All right, so as well as that, you do also have the ability to use images here. So I've just switched to a new chat. I've gone to Builder. I'm gonna paste in an image. I'll just open it up here in my window. I just picked a random login form just to kind of show you how this works. So if you want it to, for example, just like make a UI that looks like an image or something, you can do that. So I can say, can you make this in pure JavaScript, HTML, and CSS, please, in a new file? And then it can actually go ahead, view the image if you're using a model that has image capabilities. Most of them do here, and then generate that code. So let's see if it's able to do this here. I might confuse it a little bit because I am asking it to do this in an existing project that's not really relevant to it, but let's see what it can do. All right, so that just took a second. It just made a new login.html file for me. You can see it actually works. It looks pretty much identical to the image that I gave it, and that is the image capabilities that I was talking about. So I just started setting up my own custom agent here. Now, the idea behind these agents is that you can give them some very well-defined task, and then anytime you need that task done, rather than copying in prompts or writing the thing over and over again or connecting various tools, you just bring that particular agent in, you tell it to do the task, and then it does it. So in this case, I'm making one called a docstring agent. I said the purpose is you are a precise and efficient code assistant. Your job is to analyze Python functions or classes and do two things: add accurate informative docstrings, add correct type annotations for all parameters, and return types. So this way, whenever I want to do typing and docstrings, I don't need to actually tell the model to do that. I just bring in this agent and it can automatically apply them. So I have this long prompt. Obviously, the longer, the better, and the more detailed you can be, the more useful the agents are going to be. And what's really interesting here is that you can specify the tools this has access to. So down here, you'll see all the MCP servers as well as the various tools. And in this case, I probably don't want it to have access to GitHub or Puppeteer because that just doesn't make sense. And I don't want to confuse the model. So I'll just uncheck those, and now it can't use those MCP servers. Now, same thing with my built-in tools. I definitely want it to have access to the file system, but there's really no need for it to have access to the terminal or even to be able to preview something. So we can probably give it access to web search in case maybe it needs to search for some documentation or something, but that's probably all I need for this particular agent. So you have that fine-grained control, and you can make sure that it's only using relevant tools and that you block it from using something that just doesn't make sense. So I'm going to go here to create. Now I want to use this particular agent. So if we go to backend, I'm going to say, apply, or maybe I'll say do your job for the, and then I'm going to reference the file of, what is this, the backend.py, and press enter. So now it's going to grab that file and it's going to start modifying the file by adding the docstrings and the type annotations. And notice I didn't need to tell it to do that. I just said, do your job, right? And put this file in because I'm using this particular agent. So now you can see it adds the docstrings, it adds all the type annotations. We can go ahead and press on accept, and then we're good to go. So you can imagine here that if you're working on a large project, you can create all kinds of custom agents, and then you can start using these for particular tasks and really speed up your workflow, which again is something I haven't seen in the other editors. Maybe it exists, maybe I just haven't seen it, but I think is really, really cool and probably the main reason I'm going to be using this, especially for projects that have a lot of repetitive tasks. Okay, cool. So just a few last things to go over here that you might find useful. First of all, if you're using some of these higher end models like Claude 3.7, for example, sometimes you will get rate limited. But remember, this is free. So for example, if I just say, do your job on my project here, and I've enabled Claude 3.7, and maybe it's peak timing here, sometimes it will put my request in a queue. It actually looks like it's not doing this right now, even though I'm trying to test that out. And it may say, hey, your request is like number 3 out of 40 that are in this queue or something. So here you go. Say your queue position is number 1, and boom, then it went ahead and actually did this. Now, I never really need to wait that long, but I just wanted to mention that to you. When you're using the higher end models, again, because they're free, a lot of people are using them. Sometimes you get some kind of rate limit and you do need to wait a second. In my opinion, that's kind of a fair trade-off considering it's free to use, but something you should be aware of. So that is pretty much it in terms of the main features that I wanted to cover. Obviously, there's a lot more stuff that you can do here. I'm really just scratching the surface in this video, but I tried to cover the unique features to this editor so it's not super repetitive with a lot of the other tutorials. Now, I'm going to give you a rapid-fire list of some best practices to follow when you're using this to make sure you get the best results. Now, first, go here to the rules and enable some of these, right? You can just go to something like a different AI model, say generate a bunch of rules that my AI code editor should always follow, paste them in here. If you have specific rules for your projects, like you want to use snake case or camel case, or you only want to use these particular technologies, put them in here, you're going to get a way better result. Beyond that, you want to make sure you're installing the various extensions that you need for the code that you're writing. So for example, if you press here, this is the extension store, same thing as VS Code. You can go to something like the Python extension and you can make sure that's installed. I already have it installed here, but install the extensions for the code that you're writing. It'll just make your life a lot easier. Next is to make a plan. It's really important that you know what you want these models to do and that you instruct them step by step. Now you can get the model to help you make the plan. You can just go in the chat mode and you can say, hey, this is what I'm trying to build. Help me come up with a step-by-step plan. But make sure you have one of those that you can fall back on and that you can kind of track your progress with, because these models can go all over the place. And it's very important to stay structured and know what you actually want to accomplish. Lastly, use some type of version control. So something like Git, so you don't lose your work if the model goes rogue. I'm going to put a video on screen right now that is a Git tutorial for beginners. It will also be linked in the description. I highly recommend checking that out and learning the basics of Git. This can save you a ton because it allows you to checkpoint your project and your code so that if something goes wrong, if something breaks, you can revert back to a previous state. And trust me, this will save you a ton. Obviously, there's a lot of other best practices to follow, but those are some of the quick tips that I wanted to share with you, and that's going to wrap up this video. Let me know what you guys think in the comments down below, and I look forward to seeing you in another one.